All right, everybody, welcome to the President's Panel. And this is with all of the top movers and shakers in the industry. Starting on my left with Kai Micah Mills of Cryopets and Emil Kenziora of Tomorrow Biostasis and the European Biostasis Foundation, right. And then James Arrowwood with Alcor and Peter Solakidis from Southern Cryonics. All the way here from Australia. I think you're the furthest, probably the furthest. It is amazing to be able to have him out here. Thank you especially for coming out. Okay, so first I wanted to give everybody on the stage a chance to talk for just a few minutes about what their organizations are up to, or if they're going to be giving a talk or such later during the weekend, you can give us a preview of what that's going to be like, and then anything else you want to say. And then we will move on. I will then have a few questions of my own, and then I will open it up to questions from the audience, which is what you're all waiting for. So, Kai, do you want to get us started?
Sure. How's it going, guys? For those who don't know me, my name is Kai Micah Mills. I'm the founder of Cryopets. As the name would suggest, we're focusing on cryonics for pets. So we started this sort of early 2022, really got things going in 2023. We haven't done our first case yet, so we're definitely the new guys up here. But we've amassed almost 1,000 pets on the wait list, ready to be cryopreserved. We sort of had we have this theory where people really care about their pets, especially here in the U.S. I'm one of them, so I'm very much my own customer. So we're testing that theory out and seeing if it can be sort of a gateway drug to more human cryonics. Thank you. And then I'm also a co-founder alongside Emil of CryoDAO, where we're funding moonshot cryopreservation research. Looking forward to meeting those of you that I don't know, and thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Emil. I'm running Tomorrow Bio and the European Biostasis Foundation. And since my talk is the next one, I can leave some time for further questions and don't do too much of an introduction right now. We're based in Europe, cover all of Europe, and starting to cover the US now, so stay tuned for the next talk.
Hello, everybody. Mike. I'm James with Alcor, for those who don't know. Pleased to be here. First of all, thank you all. There's been a lot of travel delays. Even some of our team struggled. We lost a couple on the way. We very much at Alcor appreciate your attendance. Very important, and I'm so pleased to meet so many of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet. So
Is it on?
I don't know. Sounds like it's on.
Now it's on.
Oh, there you go. Better.
Thanks.
Thanks. This guy knows better. Anyhow, so we're so pleased that you made it, and I'm really excited to talk to so many of you. Our strengths in our membership. I have just met some incredible people along the way in the last year and a half that I've been with Alcor. Now, specifics, I have a presentation coming up, I think. And we have some really exciting announcements, some things I think people have been waiting a long time to hear out of Cryonics organization. And so Alcor is really pleased to make some announcements, but those will come shortly. So I'm going to cede to Peter.
Hi, my name's Peter Solakidis. I think I know a lot of people here, a lot more people yesterday, and today I met a lot of people. I'm with Southern Cryonics. It's taken us probably just a little bit of history, 12 years to go from the dream to the actual reality of developing a cryonics organisation in Australia. We have two organisations actually, Southern Cryonics, which is the facility, and Cryopath, which is the standby stabilisation and transportation part of our organisation. All that development, I've got to say, there's a lot of people here who helped us. A lot of the organisations, the major cryonics organisations, really helped us in developing what we did in Australia. We got started late last year. Very early this year was our official opening, and we have about 50 members so far, and we had our first patient in May, just a month or two ago. And why I stretch is because it was a hectic experience. It was a lot more hectic than what we had expected, but it went very well. So thank you all very much. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for that. Now I have a couple of my own questions. And I was told by more than one person that I can ask the hard questions. So I will ask the hard questions. Now, this one's been asked a couple of times in the past, but it's of particular importance to me. Backup contracts. If something goes wrong with an organization, any organization, if an organization has financial trouble, if there's some risk that the individuals who are currently preserved endures could go the wrong way, could warm up in the wrong time. Can there be, if there isn't, which is my understanding there isn't, can there be some kind of contractually agreed upon legal recourse so that the surviving organizations can take those patients and be able to keep them in some way or other, in some fashion or other? Maybe it's through some sort of insurance type contract or some other agreement. Is that even possible? How can we make that happen? And whoever wants to jump in can jump in. Just make sure your mic's on.
Well, I can comment on it quickly. With us, usually what happens is, a lot of these people will sign up their cat or their dog and want to have a cryopreserved, and then it kind of, a light comes on in them, and they're like, well, 100 years from now, who's going to be taking care of my dog? Now I'm interested in being cryopreserved. Of course, we don't do humans at least yet. So we send them to Tomorrow Bio or to Alcor or so on. And so I think we would definitely be very open to that and interested to see how that might work, because chances are that pet's owner is at Tomorrow Bio or will be at Tomorrow Bio or some of these other organizations. So
It's on. Okay, so one of the benefits or values of having these sorts of conferences, right, and to your thanks, Max and Dan and the rest of you, Eric, is that for people who think that, for instance, Alcor is adverse to helping or working with other organizations, that's a misnomer. We're actually actively considering what might be asked of us or what we may ask of other organizations in the event there were some sort of dire need. In fact, I've talked to our new DART people and our old DART people about what it might look like if all of a sudden we had to go do multiple simultaneous recoveries in an emergent situation because some other organization had a problem. So as much as you guys may not know, there is a lot of pre-planning, a lot of anticipation. I hope others would do the same for Alcor, but there is a lot that goes into this kind of thing logistically. Now, understand that I represent Alcor, so my membership, our membership, we do have to prioritize that in the sense of those are their funds and that money, but we do have generous donors, and I suspect that if something like that happened, the community, all of you, would hopefully contribute and help us make it possible. But we presently, I feel, have the resources in the team that could pull it off. And I can't guarantee that. I mean, you're talking hundreds or, it depends on the number. But Alcor was tested last year for the first time ever with multiple simultaneous cryopreservations. Hadn't been done before. That meant logistically you had people on the East Coast, off the coast of Africa or wherever they were, and we had to split teams and move people around. And that happened, and it was successful. So the model's there. The question is scale. And movement and scale requires, for instance, liquid nitrogen shipping. And we have some fantastic technical developments in that space. Not going to announce those yet, but Alcor's ahead of that curve, at least from our chair. I can't speak for everybody else. But we're definitely aware of the issue.
Is there any chance for a legal or contractual agreement between organizations that could make this make that possible as well?
You're talking to a lawyer. So, exactly. Sure, but Rudy, maybe you can figure out the insurance side of this thing for us. But obviously, there's substantial costs that would be involved. Okay, I can't just put those costs on our membership. In fairness to everybody, right? So how that looks, I think there's a lot of nuance in those documents. And certainly a conference like this gives me an opportunity to talk to Emil and Peter and everybody else to say, hey guys, as much as you're doing your thing over there, in this circumstance, what does it look like? Because remember, the laws are different too. You got to remember that. Like his European legal situation is vastly different than the U.S. litigious society we come from, right? Good news is I studied international in Europe, so I've done that. But we have the U.S., and the U.S. is difficult. I think it's much more difficult in litigation and risk and managing liability than some of these other places. So it's a big question.
So from our point of view, this should exist, right? There should be a backup agreement if any jurisdiction becomes geopolitically unstable, that then there's a standing agreement, at least an MOU, that like a memorandum of understanding, that other organizations would take over with pre-agreed terms, right? And so I think now we have 3 organizations, Southern Cryonics, Alcor, and us, that have price point-wise kind of ballpark the same, right? With CI in the past, this was a bit difficult because it wouldn't pay enough for the patient care trust or foundation in our case, right? But I think with these organizations, we can have backup agreements that say, especially since I don't know if Southern Cryonics also does brain or neuro, but worst case, right, patient care foundations or trusts should have enough money to do the transport if patients are being changed from whole body to neuro, right? Liquid nitrogen shipping is indeed an issue, but it can be done at large scale. And then the other organization would have so much more scale that probably the financial things can be figured out. So I would absolutely say this is an easy, no, it's not easy, but it's a good starting point to do something together.
And you raised a great point, which is the finances. So, and I'm going to talk about that a bit and touch on it in my presentation, but a big portion of the finances will have already been absorbed, right? So now we're just talking about transport and long-term storage. That is a big part of the cost, but nonetheless, some of the cryopreservation component, presumably has already been done. So there is some cost savings in that sense. It then becomes a logistics issue. And it is expensive to send these teams out. I don't think our membership has been well educated, and as an organization, I think Alcor bears some blame for that, if you want to put blame on somebody, in the sense of I don't think we've educated the membership and the public really on what our costs actually are. And as a nonprofit in particular, we're not making a bunch of money on these cases. In fact, some cases lose money, and there's reasons for that, and I'll explain that later. But yeah, the cost was a good thing to raise.
Can I just add something very quickly? Just for us, we're in the worst situation as far as that's concerned because we're the most isolated. We have developed a sort of a backup plan that we're still working on, and the idea being that, and this will sound, we're basically doing full body preservations, but what we're thinking of, taking the full body, creating a neuro out of the full body, and then transshipping the neuros overseas, which will be a lot easier for us to do. We'd have to find a willing overseas cryonics organization to handle it, but what we also want to do is we've created a pool of funds that we want to keep to at least assist with that and enable it. Now, if we had a lot of people, a lot of patients, it would be very difficult, but if we had a few, we could cover it, and that's our backup plan, being so far away in this whole thing.
And you raised a great point, which is I don't know that everybody understands that when you're transporting human remains, there is, in some jurisdictions, a big difference between just the head and the whole body. And that has to do with the head or the brain really is considered an organ. And because of organ transplant laws, it's made very easy to do so. But when you're talking about the whole body, then you need transit permits, usually from the government authority, and you can't move very quickly. So you made a great point. So converting in that instance may be part of the deal, and it may just be something we have to accept. Now the other solution too, which we haven't talked about yet, and we will, is imagine if there were more than one in-place storage location, long-term storage location, okay? And that is a concept that everybody's talked about, I think, for decades, but how do you actually implement that? And a lot of people, if you heard about the thing in Colorado that we did with Brado and the frozen dead guy and all that, a lot of people were wondering why we did that. That was actually a proof of concept. That was designed specifically so that we could take on essentially a low-risk case because they'd already been on dry ice for 30 years. Couldn't make it much worse in terms of cryopreservation. But we wanted to test a model of remote monitoring and remote fill. And Mike Perry's somewhere around here. He's a legend. I love this guy. But Mike Perry, I think daily, gets a report on Brado, right? Every single day, throughout the day, can monitor in real time with cameras, sensors on LNO2, all right? And it's been wildly successful. I mean, we haven't had any hiccups, have we? Nothing. I mean, if it needs a fill, it fills. And that's all been done remotely. So that was a test. That's proof of concept. Now it's a question of scale. So now maybe you're understanding more of the logic that went into some of these things. If we can replicate that, and we have remote locations in Australia, until we can get a team out there, that's a very useful model.
Yeah, so and one other point about this, the reason I care about this question so much is if there is a situation where a cryonics organization has trouble, et cetera, and that goes poorly, it's going to look awful on the entire industry, everything that we're up here fighting for. If it goes well, that will actually, in a lot of people's minds, remove one of the big risks that they consider, which is the risk that, oh, what if my organization goes under, has a problem? And we can then point to and say, look, that has already happened, and it was taken care of just fine. That is great. That's actually a PR win if that happens. So it can be a big, it can be big in either direction. What it won't be is just a nothing, yeah. So it's important to have addressed this issue.
In addition to media too, we have to think about regulatory authorities. If this goes bad, you know what the government tends to do? They shut it down, or they come in and regulate you out of existence. And so we're aware of that. And also historically, there was, I think was it TransTime or something out of California, Alcor and Max, you know more of the history on this, but it's not without precedence. I mean, there have been cryonics organizations that have shut down suddenly. And in those instances, I think Alcor took on at least some of those patients. So it's not without precedence, and you need to go back and look at what happened in those circumstances, figure out what was good, what was bad, analyze the situation, simplify, identify, simplify, and then correct. So we're big on that. We're already game planning for these things.
Great. So I have other questions, but I tell you what, instead of me being the one to keep droning on, I'm going to open it up to the audience. So do we have a roving mic? Somebody, Becca, you can take that? Great, thank you. So Jacob? Or yeah, Becca, you can decide who gets it afterwards.
Hello, James mentioned the transfer of Brito in August 2023, and Alcor also transferred Lise and Joel Leroy from Reunion Island in that same month. And there are also 3, so they were kept in Reunion Island for 24 years and 2 years respectively. They were transferred to Alcor last year at the same time as Brito. There are also 3 people who were preserved in permafrost in Canada in the early 90s, and according to Ben Best in his permafrost papers, permafrost internment could potentially be viable for up to 50 years. So they've been in there for 30 years now. Is there any interest in transferring them out of permafrost into cryostasis?
I don't know if that's directed at me. I haven't heard of interest from them in particular. And of course, again, I serve our members, so I have to be cognizant of cost and their dues and what they pay for. Brito was covered, so that cost was covered. I can't touch on anything else you said to other people because can't confirm or deny technically on confidential things. But with regards to recoveries, I would like to keep our DART team busy, okay? And there's very much a cycle in cryonics of when people die. It sounds weird, but you can actually statistically analyze that. So there's slow times. Those slow times don't get my people practice and work in. I think that there's an opportunity because these guys are just, guys and girls are just absolutely lights out. They're just doing phenomenal things. And I think that there might be opportunities. Imagine the good PR for everybody. This isn't just Alcor, this is everybody. But imagine if the news says, this team went out to Mount Everest and recovered X or Y or whoever the person is. There's very few teams that can do that and do it, with a phone call. Our DART, because of their government training, they're already trained to do that. They like to do that. It's kind of sick a little bit in a weird way because they put themselves at risk, but they like it, so okay. So I can see a lot of PR value in a very positive way to doing these other types of recoveries you're talking about. Now again, it has to be funded. So I'm not gonna just pull levers and switches unless there's a donor for that. But yes, it's definitely been considered.
Yeah, hi. I'm actually a research scientist, and I have worked on either as a co-author or a reviewer on a lot of specimens in permafrost. My question is, so as a scientist, we try to set up a positive feedback loop. If something works well, then it's fixed. if something doesn't work well, we try to improve it. So my question is there any attempt to maybe scan the heads of patients to see the degree of damage, the degree of preservation, and so on, and then try and change the methods to better improve that and reduce the amount of damage, increase the amount of preservation to get to a good point with that?
I mean, I know from Alcor's chair, I assume that was kind of related, but so I don't want to jump on this, and if you want to jump in too, but abso-freaking-lutely. In fact, there's an announcement coming in about 20 minutes that I think is really going to tie into what you said. Absolutely, we're looking to do CT scanning. We're looking to kind of reorient Alcor to the hard science, which involves data. And for the Brado case, which is really interesting, right? Because it wouldn't be ethical for Alcor to put somebody on dry ice for 30 years because we know we can do better with liquid nitrogen, right? But that was handed to us. That is actually a scientific example that's incredibly valuable. And surprisingly, from our chair, he looked damn good. From all the signs that we could tell, and part of the deal we have is that we get to scan Brado when the time is right. So we're going to have an N of 1 in the science world of what a body preserved on dry ice for 30 plus years looks like. We're getting that data at Alcor. And that, you can bet that's going to be analyzed and compared and contrasted, because science is really about contrasting a control group with all the experimental groups. And I am absolutely committed to that. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, we do CT scans for every case. So all of our case reports have a CT scan. We have an in-house CT scanner in Switzerland, right? And since the CTs start to look, there's not that much to optimize anymore in good cases. So from people who give us consent, we're taking microsamples of the brain to do electron microscopy. I think these are the two main quality metrics, apart from some calculatory like SMICs and so on quality metrics. I think these are the two best ones where you can, what you just said, right? See what doesn't work and what works. Problem, of course, is the sample size is so small, and there's so much other variables that it's not that easy to really pinpoint what might have gone wrong or right, but still needs to be done.
And to shoehorn on that, we had a generous donation that I should thank publicly. Won't give names, but they donated the money for a CT scan at Alcor, CT machine, $1 million. And that is pending APS, the power company. And you'll see with my next announcement in my presentation how that'll be used for the science with electron microscopy as well. And more than that, we have actually engaged with interventional radiologists to start coming up with a much more defined color parameter set, because a CT scan just by itself doesn't really tell you much unless you know what to look for, right? And I'm no doctor, Emil is, but I'm not. And we have some just top-notch interventional radiologists, which are MDs that are trained to look at CT scans and then actually designate. They're going to hopefully create a new equation, as it were, for science to use color coding to determine how well a cryopreservation in the blood-brain barrier is something we're focused on. So that's coming, but I don't want to say exactly what yet. I don't like to talk until we're done with it, but it's in the works.
Excellent panel. I am Jose from Madrid, Spain, and we have Cryonics patients in Alcor and in Tomorrow Bio, but we have also patients in the other two institutions. We have patients in Cryonics Institute and also in CryoRus. For what I understand, the largest number of patients are in Cryonics Institute, and the number third institution, close to 100 patients, is CryoRus. None of those institutions are here. And we have patients in CryoRus and Cryonics Institute. So I would like to know why no one in this president's panel from the largest and the third largest institution.
That's a good question, Jose. And I wish I had a good answer for you. But we invited Dennis, who's CEO of CI, and he was not able to make it. We invited a lot of other people from CI, and they were not able to make it. We offered them a full ride to come down to Miami, but they were unfortunately not able to make it. I hope that next year they are able to make it and are willing to come down and participate. I don't know on that one. If you can help me connect with people from CryoRus, I don't even know anybody from CryoRus. So, but yeah, in the future, if you can help me connect. My impression was, I don't really understand what's even going on in CryoRus. I thought it was, at one point, it was like coming apart, or there were a bunch of problems with CryoRus. So I don't know. Maybe you can help me understand the present situation in CryoRus. Also, the present situation in Russia is not very friendly. So I just figure the whole situation is a big problem.
Yeah, but we have a patient, and we are also very concerned. So
I would be too.
we have a Spanish patient, and I have been following with them because we want to make sure that this person remains in good shape for the future.
Tell me how I can help. tell all the people on the stage
Tell
how they
us
can
how
help.
we can help.
Yeah.
I mean, we have area experts, and some of our DART people have served overseas, all over the world, and been in countries they weren't supposed to be in, I think. But at any point, look, the only way we can help is if we know there's a problem and if we have somebody to talk to. My email is public. It's my name at alcor.org. And, we are committed to everybody to the extent we can help. So please send it to us. You'd be surprised at the reach we have and that we're getting. It's extensive now.
Hello, this is Robin Hansen back here. You guys are all selling a product I'm a customer, but what is the market research you most believe in and trust that gives you the best model for how it is you're going to sell your product to all those people out there who want it but aren't buying it?
Well, let me start, just because I think I can address that. In the 1960s, 70s, the U.S. was having a problem getting organ donors because of cultural aversion to the notion, largely based upon religious beliefs and some other cultural reasons. When I started at Alcor, my training is law. And by the way, we're not selling anything. We're a nonprofit, so Emil's answer might be different. It might be different otherwise. But the point is, we're providing a service in the service to the science. That's what Alcor is doing. But to do that, you're right. We needed cultural adoption. We need more people to look at this as less weird than people think it is. And it turned out that, who's spent the most money? Who's wasted the most money in some ways? Well, the U.S. government. And they had actually done research in the 60s and 70s. Of those of you old enough, do you remember the PSA commercials where there's like, this is your brain on drugs and as an egg and all that stuff? Well, they did a similar thing for organ donation. And the reason they did that is they had paid all these social psychologists a huge amount of money. And how do I know this? Because I went to the National Institute of Health's documents, their library, and they wanted to research how to get wider adoption. What you call marketing, I'm calling adoption in the science sphere. And what they determined was people personalized the service. And this is not unlike organ donation in a sense. And the way they personalized it was with Aunt Sally. So they literally have like this term, and you can read it, and it's old research documents. And so what I'm looking at with Alcor is making this more approachable to the wider audience by personalizing it, and you'll hear about some of that later. But there's already research out there, it's available, and they spent $50 million on it. Alcor doesn't have $50 million to do the research. But the good news is somebody else did it, and what I've done is I've taken those concepts about 1.5 years ago, and we're now interweaving them into Alcor's messaging publicly. And that was incredibly effective, because in the 1980s, guess what? Everybody was like, I want to be an organ donor, that's cool, I'm saving other people's lives. It's your legacy. And the psychology of it is legacy and how you're helping other people, even if we know it might be a little bit of self-interest in there too. So I'm not reinventing the wheel. The wheel's been invented. All we're doing is finding the information, and $50 million was spent getting it, and we've got it, so use it. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, I think really no one really knows yet. So I mean, when you ask studies, right? Studies, if you ask people, is cryopreservation something you want to do? 20% of population says this is my end-of-life choice. 20%. We did one study. There's a couple of other researchers that did sociology studies as well. And then last month we signed up 50 people, 50 something, which is better than before. But between 20% of population and 50 people, there's a big difference. So how to narrow that gap? I mean, I think no one really knows yet. I think we know by now a couple of the problems that we're going after, but fully how to figure this out, I think no one knows yet.
I feel like you have some ideas on this.
Yeah, so we're VC backed. We're a for-profit. We're not a nonprofit. So I had to convince investors early on, and I'm still having to convince investors that this is investable, right? And a lot of that comes down to, are people actually going to want this? And I had to make sure that early on I wasn't the only person in the planet who wanted to cryopreserve cat, right? Because I thought I might be. And it turns out that I'm definitely not. You know, we've done some pretty extensive surveys. We've talked to a lot of pet owners, hundreds and hundreds of pet owners. And for us, it's around maybe like 70 to 75% of people. It depends how we frame the question, but we usually frame it in, you know, if your pet is dying, there's nothing else you can do, would you be open to cryopreservation? Would you consider this? And most of the time, this answer is yes. It's like 70 to 75% of the time. So we've asked this in a lot of different ways. How many of those people are actually going to cryopreserve their pets and sign up? You know, I guess we'll see. You know, we're gonna have to find out. But there's definitely a broad amount of interest. People kind of in the pet world, it can kind of skip over some of those reservations that people have. So, you know, maybe some people see it as selfish for them, but for their dog, they don't see it as selfish. So, yeah, that's the route that we're exploring, and I guess check back in a couple of years, see how we're doing.
Can I just quickly add something? Can I put a little bit of a damper on some of this too, just to be controversial? We in Australia had 2 or 3 or 4 milestones in building our facility. It was when it was built, when we opened, and then when we had our first patient. And there were some others, but these milestones, we received a phenomenal amount of publicity. I mean, we were doing interviews, there were programs, and not just publicity in terms of commercial sort of time. We were on news programs, et cetera, et cetera. I think we did a lot of, I worked out we probably got millions of dollars worth of free publicity. The first one, we got 0 people even interested. Nobody contacted me, nothing, after millions of dollars. Second one, again, 0 people. I'm not talking about people signing up. I'm talking about just querying, you know, asking what is Cryonics or sending us a note. And this is after what you would call millions of dollars of publicity. The last one we did get, but you know, we're talking about saturation type. After we had our first patient, we had saturation type advertising, and I'm talking really, I did a quick calculation, many millions of dollars. I got 4 queries, and nobody's really joined up, you know, after that. Yeah, and that, we're talking a lot of money if you had to go out and spend for all this publicity. So basically, I'm not sure. Everybody we ever got, we have 50 people. We got, in fact, they hadn't even seen the TV stuff or whatever it was. We got them through either word of mouth or Cryonics. They got interested, they looked it up on our website or whatever it might be. So I'm not going to be, as I said, very optimistic when people tell me we ought to go out and market it. And I'm pretty sure it's been marketed over the last 50 years in a lot of ways. And it's not like our numbers boom when you see that. And I think I've got some real world. Now, it may be that something else happens and we get a lot of results. But as I said, I'm not optimistic of that, but I'd love to hear if there's another method of doing it.
Yeah, I'll jump in here a little bit on your point. So Alcor's had a little bit of a different experience. So when we've done media, we do get a lot of interest, but understand there's a barrier to entry, meaning the cost. People call, you know. I do think pets is a great entry point. I think we need to lower the cost substantially. We have some thoughts about how to do that at Alcor. But we still need that good insurance, Rudy, so don't worry. But yeah, that's one thing. But I have a really positive thing for all of you, okay? I want to give you something because I look at all of you as what I call possibility thinkers. And that's what the world really needs, right? You need to think of what's possible. And if you're here, you're one of those, so to everybody's credit. But so you all don't know me and my background. One, I do believe in a lot in subversion in public messaging. That's something I'm familiar with. So you got to kind of go roundabout. You don't always want to attack it head on. I think a lot of people's mistake has been they come right out of the box with revival and talking about certain things. And I think you have cultural and religious reasons that's a hang up for people. Okay. So we're taking a little different approach, number one. Number two, the really great, fantastic news, if you're not aware, is that I lecture on this, I teach on this at some places, universities, is in emerging technology, which is my space, what happens is, you know what the test is for emerging technology and cultural adoption? Super Bowl commercials. Super Bowl commercials. I kid you not. And the reason I bring that up is in 2013, one example I give to the college kids is that in 2013, Mercedes put out one of the first commercials about unmanned driving cars. Now, it wasn't because the technology was ready yet, okay? I mean, it was, but they weren't going to put it out in the mainstream yet. It was about 5 years away. That's how the people with all the money, the billionaires, these big companies, that's how they measure things. It's about 5 to 10 year rollout periods for testing. 5G, you were getting commercials 2 years before, 3 years before, always Super Bowl. This year, for the first time ever, Cryonics was featured in a big way in a Popeyes Super Bowl commercial, okay? If you hadn't seen it, one of the actors from the movie The Hangover, main big actor, right, well known, popped out of a cryonic preservation and was so excited that Popeye's chicken now existed. But the reason I mention that is it wasn't met with derision. The young people today, they have friends that were born via IVF. IVF is just kind of the reverse of the process, right? At birth, they become sentient brains. For those of you who are old enough, you remember test tube babies were thought to be zombies and soulless. They're not. They're walking around. You don't know who they are. They're all around us now. So they altered the cultural acceptance of something, and they did it through this kind of subversive marketing and advertising. It is now happening. And I paid great attention to that. I actually reached out to Popeyes. So there's a lot of good news, which is for, I think, the 20s and under, this isn't something that they look at as being so weird as long as you message it correctly. And the messaging is really, really important. And that's Alcor is reorienting the messaging. You're going to see that. But we did 60 Minutes Australia. Do you remember? Yeah, you saw that?
You know how much response? 0.
For you? But we got response.
We got 0.
We got response. I don't know. And the hard, yeah, I don't know. But the hard part is when they call and then they hear the cost, right? And of course, I explained that good insurance will cost you about the same as a nice funeral. So again, messaging, how can they afford it? Lead with that. And these are all calculated things, but we have a staff of, I think, 12 people, not including DART. So we are looking to expand staff in terms of member communication, and I don't call it marketing, but just public education. So there's really good news with that Super Bowl commercial. That is a paradigm shift.
And one final point on this before we move to the next question. To your point, Robin, I think this is the biggest problem that Cryonics has. If it's such a good idea, why aren't more people doing this? So that's why we're here, right? I'm trying to figure out, maybe if we put everybody who's working on this, who cares about this, into one room from all around the world, maybe we can come up with some good ideas and finally change the growth curve of this technology. So yeah, anybody who has ideas, anybody who thinks they have a good way to change this, please talk to, especially the people on this stage, but everybody else. We need to solve this problem for the tens of millions that are dying every year that could potentially benefit from this.
So how many deanimations at any one given time can your SST team respond to? And then what is the storage capacity of each of your facilities for whole bodies? And then how are you preparing for increasing attrition rates among those that have member populations that are aging?
In the interest of time, to get a few more questions in, I'm answering really quickly. So currently 2, end of this month, early next month 3 concurrent cases. 500 right now. We can expand to 1,500 in Switzerland, and then new storage facilities. And what was the last question? Attrition rate?
Yeah, how are you preparing for increasing attrition rate among the older member groups that may be having more deanimations in one given year than others?
I mean, we prepare for it by building more teams. I don't know if that's the question, but I don't fully understand the question.
I think I understand the question, and it's, for Emil, I think it's a different question, because I think overall your members are younger, right? Much more so than Alcor. So we've done the studies now at Alcor with the distribution of membership. It's about evenly split, a third, a third, a third, which is actually really good in a weird way. It's a really good thing. And I can break that out later. There's questions and answers tomorrow, so we can get in depth on that. But with regards to multiple simultaneous deployments I talked about, that had never been done before last year that I'm aware of with one organization. We pulled off, I think, 3 at once. meaning we were transferring teams. I do anticipate when we focus on membership in 2025, which I'm not going to announce yet, but there's some really big developments there. I do not want to grow membership right now because I don't want to try and fail. A failure will be a disaster for everybody, especially Alcor because the media. So what we're doing and focusing on right now is building infrastructure to support that. That's part of what our DART program is. I would say we could probably do, with a stretch, maybe 5 simultaneous deployments, and it depends on geography. You know, if you're talking to Africa, you know, coast of Africa, you're talking whatever, but we have done successfully, I think, 3 at once. So 5 could be done, I think.
One quick point. Max, you can ask your question, but then after that, anybody who has a final question, maybe for either Kai or for Peter, because Emil and James are going to be speaking very soon.
So we know that when we look at nice results in the lab, we've got tissue that's just been perfectly cryopreserved, it looks fantastic. In the real world, we know that's not the way things work. There's always a ischemic period, and that's a big problem. In response to that, I know Emil's organization, and I just heard for the first time, I think a group, I think based in Poland, apparently is offering a combination of cryoprotection and chemical preservation, which we use the ugly word vitrifixation for. So I'd like to know for the organizations that are not currently offering that, why not and when? Thank you.
Well, I can.
We're not, sorry, go on, you go.
Sure. I can, start by saying, to that problem that you mentioned at the first part, the good thing about pets is the vast majority of their deaths are planned. So it's once in a while we do get there's definitely emergency situations, but oftentimes the veterinarian has decided that this pet is towards the end of its life. Best thing to do is to euthanize it, and then we can go directly from the euthanasia to cryopreservation on the same table. So we actually will get those lab quality cases in the majority of our cases at least. But
just very quickly for us, we've got a sort of a sister organization called Neural Archives, and they also do pets. And we have tried aldehyde fixation and that as sort of experimental stage. We're looking at various things that we're going to do, but don't forget we're very early stages, so we'll go with the base stuff for a while until we can expand out to other options.
If I had to simplify the question and how I heard it, was what you're asking about is modalities of cryopreservation, how we do things. As you know, at Alcor we have a board, and that's a challenge to change anything, number one. But number two, there's a good reason for that challenge. Everything is extraordinarily taken apart as to why we would do anything. And they want to see what we call validation testing to a degree that's, wildly operationally difficult. That's a good thing. I really think it is a good thing. And I think that Alcor's process right now is the state of the art with M22, as we know it, and Greg Fahey's here somewhere. Not to say, though, that we aren't looking at other methods or modalities. We absolutely are, because if you've heard anything I've said today, I'm probably projecting and looking at things. So other modalities are examined constantly, really, because there's always people coming up to us with these ideas and we could do it differently, right? But we want hardcore research scientists to kind of bless even the initiation of anything because there's expense involved. That's members' money. So at Alcor, I will say that we are exploring lots of different options, but we actually think that there might be some new developments in technology because a lot of this technology is 20 plus years old. We think that outside of the cryonics sphere in cryobiology circles, that there are developments that may really impact things. And I'm not going to publicly discuss all that yet because I don't like to talk about things until they're done. But you can bet your ass that Alcor's on top of that, for sure.
All right, I think that's all the time we have. But remember, all these people are around for the entire rest of the weekend. So thank you, everybody. And the next thing we'll have here